Real quick, before we start this podcast episode, I just want to say thank you for tuning into the Marc Colcer podcast. I know you've got a million things that you could be doing right now, and the fact that you're taking time out of your day to watch this podcast episode truly means the world to me, and I just want to say thank you for that. If you'd like to continue to support the podcast, right below this video, if you could hit the subscribe button, and then, hey, if you got some more time and you want to hit the download button, the comment button, the like button, the share button, any of those buttons, it's greatly, greatly appreciated. It helps for other people to find out about the podcast, and it helps for you to be notified about future episodes. So if you guys could take a quick second, hit the subscribe button, I would really appreciate that. Outside of that, this episode and every other episode is brought to you guys by Roast Umber Coffee. As some of you guys know, I co-founded Roast Umber Coffee, and we have the greatest farmers in Guatemala and Honduras and the greatest roaster in Grand Rapids, Michigan, all to bring you guys the greatest cup of coffee possible. So if you'd like to try it out, go to our website, use the coupon code MARC30, and you're going to get 30% off your coffee. Now on to the episode. Thank you guys again for tuning in. Welcome to the Marc Colcer podcast. This might be the earliest I've had somebody over here for a podcast.
Yeah, it is 9. Yeah, you bright and early.
Yeah, bright and early. Get the day started, you know. I love it. But yeah, man, you've made some headlines since we last had you on the podcast.
A little bit.
So first off, welcome back, man. Appreciate you having you back out here. And dude, let's just jump into it. Here's the thing for people who don't see what the behind the scenes is like. It's like you got here at 9 a.m. and we've been shooting this shit for the last like hour and a half.
Right.
Just basically talking about, what's been going on, what you've got coming up that you can't necessarily talk about yet on the podcast. And then that's where we get into those brainstorming sessions that I just get geeked up on because I just get excited about the future. And that's my favorite part about these podcasts. And I wish everybody could hear all of that, but I also understand the reality of like, well, if you show them everything, you got to have a few bullets left in the chamber, right? So it's, dude, it's just exciting. So let's just start, man, with first off, how's your morning going? How about that?
Bright and early, man, like 5:30. I've been up for a couple hours now, so just getting into it, ready to rumble.
There we go. So, okay, so let's walk through. Since you last came on the podcast, let's kind of walk through what's happened, right? Mm-hmm. You put out Bombaclot on Solana. You put out Ring Runners on Polygon. And so let's break them up real quick. Let's talk about Bombaclot. What was your expectation? How did it match the expectation? Kind of walk me through what all happened with Bombaclot.
Yeah, so Bombaclot was essentially an experiment. We were trying to figure out ways that we can expand our ecosystem, drive interest on Polygon, and also like expose like a dual exposure for our ecosystem, allowing them an opportunity to see something else. And, we were thinking low economic, low entry point, allow them to have maximum upside. We already knew we didn't really have that many relationships on Sol. So, we relied on some of the DAOs and some other entities to kind of help us kind of get a footing in the Solana ecosystem. To be honest with you, my speculation is that like just knowing what the behavior of our diamond hand holders, it was probably going to be around like 2-3 Sol. But like right after it sold out and like where people can put in like their bids or whatever, it was like 8 Sol, and it just didn't make any sense to us. It was just like, this is insane. But I think the overall expectation was we wanted to do something on Solana to allow people to know that Polygon has real builders, but also like shifting the paradigm associated with what's possible. Like, how's a Polygon guy over here building on Sol doesn't know any Sol influencers? Like, that was like the biggest thing, right? So when we got there, there was some speculation when we first started to build up to it, and then I didn't have to use Solana, to be honest with you. There's quite a few of them in our project, obviously, from like the DAOs, but I think majoritarily there was a ton of hype associated from Polygon side that wanted to be a part of something truly special on another chain to create, like, to give us some representation in another ecosystem, which was Solana. And I was just like, all right, this is cool. We did the artwork. We purposely did the artwork a certain way because we wanted to create the desire, like the room to grow into it. Like, there's more to it than what you just see. Most people intuitive, like, oh, the art's mid, yeah. But the idea was we wanted it to kind of be like right there in the middle because, one, I was doing more market research. I see projects with great, super detailed artwork perform horribly. And I see projects that have horrible artwork that perform amazingly. So I was like, let's be in between. Let's make mid great again, right? Like, and the idea was to like be able to kind of like pivot at any point. So when we launched it, I'll never forget it. Obviously, it sold out, which was not even a problem. It's $3 mint. Like, I think at the time, which was crazy because there were people like, don't launch right now because like the market's tanking. Like everything was down. I think Sol was like 14, almost $13. And I was like, no, we're gonna rock it. Like I'm confident. And I'll never forget it. You know, I'm partnering with my Magic Eden, and I'm talking to the dev. He's like, yo, you guys want to launch this in 3 days? We don't really do that. Like we want it to be like a week out. And I'm just like, nah, we're ready to go. We already got everything ready to go, dude. Like we have to launch this. And we launched, I can't remember the exact date, but it ripped. I mean, holy hell, it ripped. I mean, before it even opened up, there were 8 sold offers on it. And then that thing just cranked. I think over a course of like 7 days, we generate over $1 million in sales, over I think like 55,000 sold traded. And then it got all the way up to 19 sold. And obviously like it's over speculated, like it's super high. And I think there was a lot of FOMO built in from the ecosystem that kind of drove it to that price point. We've kind of tapered off a bit to kind of settled back at like a more realistic, but even at like our 10 sold floor currently is astronomical in comparison to zero visibility associated with sold people. Like it was just like, where did this guy come from and where did they come from? Is because, you know, I'll never forget the day we sold out. It was funny because and this is like the true thought process. It was like literally an experiment and in a good way. I had my DGOD. I set my DGOD as my all account on it because I had every intention to doxing myself to the community, but I wanted to see, like, if you come into a project that's on Sol, you never knew it in your Sol maxi, and you see DGODs at the top that own it, you're like, oh shit, okay, yeah, I'm fucking with this, right? Essentially, but the reality was, that was my take because instead of putting like my Owlpha, I decided to do DGODs because I thought it would resonate with the people that were coming in the server automatically. So I'll never forget it. The day we sold out, I opened up a space and I'm like, hey guys, I know you don't know who I am, but my name, I go by Mr. Mint and I'm a Polygon builder. And you're about to be reintroduced to the way the space works. And they were just like blown away, like, wait, what? Who is this guy? And the idea was to change the narrative associated with it. Like they had never heard of me. They don't know who we are, where we came from. And I was like, you may be wondering how this thing moved the way it did. It's because it was powered by Polygon. Like there's the entire Polygon ecosystem is in that Bombaclot project. And people are like, well, you're a Polygon native. Like, yeah, I am. But also I want to be able to bring liquidity back and forth because the biggest issue we deal with from a Polygon side is how do we get new people to take, aware of what we're doing here. And I'm a guerrilla warfare type of guy. Like, all right, if they're not coming over innately, let's make them come over. So what did I do? I went and built a dope product on their ecosystem, drove a lot of hype and engagement, and literally converted people into our Polygon ecosystem because Bombaclot's housed in the same centralized server with Owlpha, Galactic Eagle, Ring Runners, all those. And people get it now. They're just like, yo, this is dope. Like I'm in a server with 3, 4, or 5 other projects that are under the same entity that I can communicate with and stuff. And then it's kind of like bolstered the representation of like Bombaclot and what it was. So like, we didn't expect it to do, I didn't expect it to go 18, 19 sold. Like that was crazy. Like every day we would look at it and it was like, where's it going? And to be able to do $1 million in sales on Sol the way that we did with that experience was crazy to us. Like we were just kind of blown away by the response from it. And now it's holding strong around like 9, 10 sold, which is pretty good considering it was a $3 mint. Like who's not winning? You got the people that are grumpy, like, oh, I bought the top. I'm like, dude, we're not even done yet. This thing's going to be a Ferrari. I share with you some of the exciting things we're going to do with like the upgrade mechanic that we're going to do for the project and some other things. So it's got tons of potential. Shout out to Hello Moon. Those guys are handling a lot of the infrastructure side on the Sol side of stuff for us. So it makes it a lot easier, but I'm really bullish on what we can do on Solana as well. Obviously I'm Polygon through and through, but I think as we create brand awareness from a lab perspective, it creates more legitimacy cross chains for us. So people are very not apprehensive to kind of like jump into our ecosystem. Like, oh, wow. Like they've got a Sol project that's doing pretty well. They've got a Polygon project that's doing well. Like they've got even an Ordinals project that's doing really well. These guys know what they're doing. I can be a part of it because it's not so much about the project. It's about IP and like having these old IPs. And I think if I had to do 1 to 10 on expectation, like it exceeded. It's like a 13. Like I couldn't even imagine because I see projects that we only raised 20 grand, man. Like that was the raise for Bombaclot, and yet we're still pouring resources into it because we want to give it. I had this call, I think with my team, and I was like, look guys, Bombaclot is a beast. It's a savage monster. And we can't just, it was supposed to be a degen mint just based on the metric sizing, like it was 0.27 soul. And I was just like, yeah, we got to put resource behind this thing. We've got to like bolster this. Let's make it the Genesis collection on Soul for us. Like, let's make it like Owlpha. And that's what we did.
Why'd you decide 0.27? Like, where'd that number even come from?
I talked to a lot of people in the space that talk about degen mints, and like the whole plan was to come out to stir up the degen mint meta. But like, I felt like it was disadvantaging of it, right? So when we were looking at certain sizing metrics, I was thinking like, what gives us the highest rate of success to accomplish it? Because at the infancy stages, it was essentially just going to be a PFP project. But as momentum and hype built up in the server, I was like, wait a minute, what is going on? When it sold out and just cranked, I was like, there's no way we can just, like, we've got to really put some work into it. And then, you know, I think 0.27 was like optimal. I think it just made sense because it stayed true to what like we harp on about like low economic impact mints give you ton of upside. So like, can they really paper down a 0.2 mint, but with the backing and bolstering of like our entity made it that much more, you know, people have more conviction in it. So like, I mean, it ripped. I mean, it was insane, dude. Like you couldn't even buy, people were like, I got my Soul wallet stacked up and like it opened at like 8 Soul. It was just like, wow. And it just ripped. I mean, I'd never seen anything like that. Mind you, I haven't been about you know, that many different Soul mints in my life, but like, wow.
I mean, in those market conditions, it was crazy. Like it was something that, I mean, you and I met a few weeks before the Bombaclot mint, and I remember you telling me about Bombaclot and the mint and everything like that, and I remember just kind of thinking like, he's got balls like that. I can confirm, you know, and I was like, cause it's, you know, not the greatest market conditions for it right now, but like, hey, let's see. And then it cratered even more. Like if the market conditions were bad 2 weeks before, the week of it was even worse. And I was like, man, he's still going for it. Like, and I respect, I think in this space, people think like, you know, everybody thinks they know what you should do. Right. Mm-hmm. And, you know, and I have general ideas of what I think projects should do. And there's other smart people who think they know what projects should do. And you might think you know what projects should do. And the person who's watching this might think what they know what projects should do. But the reality of it is you got to try shit. And some things are going to work. Some things are not going to work. And it is what it is. Like, but if the moment you stop trying is the moment you've kind of just given up. And like those people, obviously, we don't need them in the ecosystem. Right. I like the people who try shit because we got to see what's going to work. We don't know until we try things. We don't have 10 years of history in the NFT space. We got roughly 2 years, basically, right?
Pretty much.
And so the reality of it is, you know, it was like, okay, is this a ballsy time to mint? Sure. But like, do we also have a ton of experience of like people minting during times like this? No. So it's like, hey, try it out. I respected the hell out of the fact that you go with the 0.27 mint, like super low. I mean, it's literally like you can't even get a coffee for that, right? And so it was like, okay, hey, you try it out. And then I see this thing ripping and I'm like, holy shit, this thing is going, you know? And it was cool to see people on Solana kind of, because I remember you would ask me at one point kind of like, you know, do people on Solana, like, do they know about Bombaclot? Are they excited for it? And I was like, yeah, you know, I see some like murmurs of people talking about it, you know, whatever. And then all of a sudden the mint comes out and everybody was talking about it. And all of a sudden the questions of like, yo, who is this Mr. Mint guy? What the fuck is he doing? He's a Polygon guy. Like, let me look more into that. Right. Yeah. And so it seemed to be, there was an instant, you know, amount of respect that came for you, you know, at that time, which is obviously good to see. And, you know, obviously I've got love and respect for you. So it was exciting to see other people recognizing, you know, the thought that you put into each of these different things and all of that. And so, so I want to go, before we go a little deeper into that, I want to go into Ring Runner. So you go, okay, so you got Bombaclot, you know, done, it's good, it's ripping, you know, whatever, and then boom, you hit it right back with Ring Runners, which is on Polygon. So explain to me, because obviously the number one question, I'm sure you get asked it every day, is like, is this too many mints? Is this, I know your name is Mr. Mint, right? But like, is this too many mints? How are all of these going to, you know, I guess, you know, how are you able to run all of these? What's the game plan of having it? You know, are we going to be sitting here this time next year and you got 755 projects and it's impossible to manage all of those? Like, what is, so for your end of things, like, how do you look at new mints, and then kind of what was the decision making with Ring Runners and all of that?
Yeah, no, it's probably one of the most like talked about questions or conversations, and somewhat controversial and like mentality with people. And I think for us, specifically me being as crazy as I am, I look at each project as an IP, right? An opportunity to expose people to a thought or an idea. And I think with Ring Runners, I built the IP back in 2021. Actually drew the first characters back in 2017. And obviously, the plan was deployed on ETH as a play to earn, and it was pixel based, which I'll get to that why that's truly special, because I have something really, really ingenious for the people that are a part of the Ring Runners Mint. And when we decided to bring it to Polygon, it's because there's low gas fees. It's just super easy to be able to like do that. And my idea from the initial stages of like what Manifest Labs is to be the Marvel studio of Web3. So I tell people, don't focus so much on like the utility focused aspects of NFT and the value prop, but understand the IP potential that is associated with it, because like that's where the true potential is. That's where the true revenue opportunities are from a business perspective. So when I look at a new idea, I'm like, okay, where can we put this? How effective can it be? And what can we generate? What type of excitement and experience can we generate off of it? Because the reality is, and this is just my take, and I could be completely wrong. I don't know. This could all crash and burn 6 months from now. But the way that my gut tells me is that when people from outside look in, they like variety. They like to look different things. Do they love and kind of build symbiotic relationships with particular brands? Absolutely. But I think that's not necessarily my take on the space. My take is like, all right, we want to be the Marvel studio. So like, let's have multiple IP so that when you come through the door, and you come into Manifest Labs, you're like, all right, they've got that. What do I want? What do I want today? Right? I want analytical tools. I want PFP. I want play to earn. Like, you have a little bit of everything. And one of the things is, well, we don't care about chains. Like, why do we care about chains? Chains don't matter. What matters are the people that you're not buying a project because of the chain it's on. You're buying the person that's selling you on it and the aesthetic and the attachment. So we try to focus on like the human psychology behind NFTs, right? Like, let's build a deeper connection with Manifest Labs. I love Marvel. It is one of my favorite of all time IP. Like, Marvel is the king, but yet how many IPs do they have? A lot of them. But where there's no playbook. There's no rule book to what we're doing here. Right. And I'm not following conventionality no more. I don't give a shit what anybody says about, you're not supposed to have this. That to me makes no sense. Right. I want to make sure that, one, our people are exposed to multiple chains because it provides huge opportunity. Two, multiple IPs, because that may not be the sauce today. Tomorrow it may be that, right? And to combat that, you allow your holders centralized in one hub to be able to have the fluidity to move to whatever direction they want to and shift their bags to whatever particular IP within the same ecosystem. Because I know what's inside of me, right? Like, we've got 13 years of continuity. My partner, I've worked with him for 13 years. On outside of the world, not to mention it's a family business for me. We've got all my background, military, how we operate and disorganize this thing. And then from the development standpoint, we look at it like this. I sit here and now I'm like the brainchild of everything. And I have individual pods of creators and managers and developers on top of each project. And then I just put out the information like, hey, this is what we need to do. Doom, boom, boom, boom. They manage it. We help grow them. The communities are intertwined. It only becomes an issue when you're managing multiple discords. Everything is inside of each other and they're all built in the same multiverse. So essentially the storyline, the lore will all tangle up together. So that way it's not hard for us to bring these things in together. Each event, whether it's a game, merchandising, developments, all those things somehow tie in together when the full master plan goes. And because I run it like a military organization, like I am the big Colonel Bird at the top, and then I've got my commanders, and then I've got like subordinates underneath that, and everything else managing to mitigate risks, to expedite our development, and to be able to manage the amount of people that we have. Because in the macro, you want to be able to draw excitement and attention, but you also want to be able to start accumulating more consumers because you need them for mass adoption. And when you have a go-to-market strategy where you're looking to be able to implement certain products into the space, I'm looking at from this perspective, I need to have more IP. Like, why limit yourself on IP when you can have more, right? Because this space, like, it may take for a cartoon series, and I'll just use this as an example, like cartoon series, it may take 2 to 3 years for it to take off. What we can generate in the Web3 space happens in months, right? Like, it literally, and we're really only maybe less than 20,000 wallets, right? That is really interacting in the space consistently. So when I think about that, I'm like, I need to have more, because when people come, they want variety, they want choice, right? I don't want to just kind of like, just keep myself kind of like this nailed to this particular space. I want to be able to be as diverse as possible. And I think like the way that we go about it every day, like we'll have our meetings and we'll be like, all right, Today, what's the primary agenda for GG, right? Because then as a holder of Manifest Labs, you have so much, like you never bored. Like you're waking up like, yo, something's coming out for Bombaclot today. You're a bag holder of all the projects and you're excited because there's so many experiences happening consistently. It keeps our holders fulfilled. Like they're not going out and getting rugged. Like I see it in my community all the time. Like, dude, I don't even think about the projects. I'm just like, when's our next mint? Like it's exciting to them. Like now it's personal. Like people are like, what's the next adventure? Like, what are we going to do? What's the next development? What's the next lore that comes out? And I think that's exciting to us. I spend hours just reading threads in our server because there's so many diversities inside of it. And I think it, from a business perspective, it gives me a high level analytic on what's happening inside of my ecosystem. And then I can get that direct consumer response instantaneously and feed off of it no matter what chain they're on. And I can get social sentiments across different medians like that. Like I can literally get the information, like how's everybody feeling on Sol today? Well, let me go into the Bombaclot chat to see how people are feeling, what they're talking about. You know, the what was the dog?
Bodoggos.
Bodoggos came out. I didn't even really know what was going on, but I was in the Bombaclot server seeing them talking about it. But they're in Manifest Labs, and a majority of the people on Polygon didn't even know about that, and they were being educated. So I think we're self-sufficient in a sense because, one, we empower from within. So people that are attached to IPs, the brands, and what we're building, our ethos, we empower them, so economically empower them. So we're not just giving you a tag and say, "Oh, work with us." No, we're economically empowering those people from within, which that gives them like a skin in the game because they're holders as well. Two, we run the organization like a military operation, so from the top down. And then me being like a visionary or a thought leader in my particular organization and the voice, I have a very clear understanding of what I'm trying to accomplish, but it's never been done before. So I don't have a median to ping it off of. We're like, oh, that didn't work like that because you never did that. I mean, to be honest with you, we've launched 5 projects and every last one of them sold out. And most of them, I think more than half of them have generated over $1 million in sales. I think we're sitting currently at like 4 million in sales collectively from all of our IP in the span of 3 months, from 0 to that. So for me, I think the accumulation of IP that positions us for merchandising, for IP utilization. We just gave IP right utilization for Owlpha character in a Japanese game that came out called Jinso. So we're in there as a wearable on that particular game. We've got some toy companies talking to us. But if I didn't have Ring Runners, if I didn't have Galactic Eagle, would these conversations have happened? We want to be a conglomerate. We want to be a big force in the space. And I've shared with something to you that's really pertinent in regards to what our play is from the Web 2 perspective. But I think once people take a step back and realize either you're going to do it or someone else is going to do it for you. Like Marvel bringing their stuff into NFTs and putting their IPs there is no different than what I'm doing. The difference is I'm creating them as I go so that way you can grow attachment to them. And as Wolf, like I use this analogy on my spaces. Like we're building the house, right? You clear out the lot, you lay your concrete down, and you put up the surface, the structure on the outside. That's what we're doing. We're putting the foundation up. Once we've got the roof on, then we go lay up the insulation, the roofing, and then we go in and put in the carpet and everything like that. We're in the stage right now deploying our IP, getting people attached to the IPs, building relationship, building community. And then now we start to build the underlying utility, which is like the functionality that's associated with each independent IP. And then people start to like really get rooted in Manifest Labs. Like this is the marvel of the space. Like these guys doing it. And then we're going to tie it all together in a big intergalactic event that allows all the IPs to work together in some facet, whether they're adversaries or they're the good guys or the heroes. We want this kind of big, massive experience for people to be a part of, and they can be represented by different entities, not just specifics. Like, yeah, there's the Alpha holders, there's all these different, there's the Ring Runners holders, but at the same token, I want the attachment to our IPs, like the actual, like the Manifest IP itself is the big entity. And when I look at what Marvel's done, I have to use what they've done because like they're the biggest. I'm looking to replicate. I'm not creating superheroes. I'm just creating storylines that are very intuitive and very creative that allow us to be able to do really cool things. If we want to do manga, if we want to do live animation, if we want to do gaming, we have all that ability and flexibility to do so. And I think the path I'm taking is no one's really done this type of path that I'm taking and had this amount of success this early on. Have we raised a ton of money? Absolutely not. But the success is the proof. We just raised almost $750,000 on Polygon, which is a dead ecosystem to everyone that says it's dead. And we were able to do it with the power of Solana, Cardano, and and Polygon with those communities that we built. Even the Reddit community is fully built into our ecosystem. So I think it's the structure, the mental structure. Do I think everybody could do what I'm doing? No, but I just think like when you look at brands natively, like I don't want to chain my down because we've been building for so long. I don't need to spend 2 years to figure out where my brand direction is going to go because it's not that young. People think it's young. People that don't look from the outside in are thinking, shit, they haven't even done anything with Owlpha. Like you haven't given it time to grow. I've been growing this shit for 3 years. The half of the stuff that we put out, we can't put it out because like people couldn't conceptualize how fast we move because we already have all of it built. We turtling things intentionally. Right now, I'm getting the IP out and then raising capital as I go to be able to continue to bolster Manifest Labs on the delivery and acceleration standpoint. And then like each particular entity will have its own day in the sun like that. It just makes it so it's exciting to be a part of our ecosystem because like it's not static to one or two and not knocking nobody, but this is my strategy. This is the way that I want to do it. And I think it rethinks the wheel on what's possible. And most people are so kind of chained to the fact that I can only have 1 or 2 IPs and it's got to be derived of, if I do an airdrop, it's got to be that. No, who said that's the way it goes? Yes, there's references to where it shows success, but have I not shown a layer of success? Maybe my path is something that's viable for people. 5 straight mints, all sellouts, never a question. And I've got more interest in where we're going now to the next chain than I ever, when that was completely taboo to even think like that in 2021. You couldn't even have another project, let alone be 3 months in the development of your projects from an outside looking in and then be deploying more. It seems counterintuitive, but it's very intuitive because we're not necessarily focused on what everyone else is. We're focused on positioning our IPs in the respective ecosystems so that we can garner as much attention as possible for the big plays, which are going to be crossing these brands into the Web 2 format in these kind of physical goods or other things that we talked about that people just aren't aware of because they're looking at the macro, not the big window, like the big play. There's a big play here that people are missing. If I had any criticism is about like, well, maybe you guys are doing too much. You don't really have enough time. I'm like, no, we've been building for 3 years. Like we know what we're doing. You just think that it's only been 3 months. It's been way longer, not to mention 12-hour days, just like formulating this. So
what people need to do too is they got to zoom out a little bit. And what I mean by that is like if you told me a year ago, hey, people on Solana are going to be talking about Polygon projects. People on ETH are going to be talking about Solana projects. People on Bitcoin or people on Polygon are going to be talking about Bitcoin projects. And all these different people are now talking about each other. When a year ago, Solana people focused on Solana projects, ETH people focused on ETH projects, and I don't even know if Polygon really, like, communities even really existed a year ago, right? Like, we are now in this world where we are starting to cross-connect, right? And that's a beautiful thing. We need that, right? So now you got people, every day somebody could be talking about a Polygon project, a Bitcoin project, a ETH project, a Solana project. Like, we've now seen people talk about Sui. Like, there's so many different ways the expansion is going, and you know, I always kind of compare all of this to the trading card world. And I look at it of like, you know, the biggest collectible market in the world, I would assume has to be trading cards. Like it is, it's stood the test of time. It's been around for a long time. And every year there's new accomplishments and things like that. And when you look at that, you know, if you look at like, for people who don't know much about like the whole baseball card world and stuff like that, they have like Bowman and Topps are like their 2 top product lines, right? But within that, they've got, you know, Bowman Chrome. They've got, they've got Bowman, Bowman Draft. They got Bowman First Edition. They've got, you know, all these different Bowman Sapphire. They've got Topps. They've got Topps Chrome. They got Topps Sapphire. They have all these different expansions of the IP, right? And then you've got now Fanatics, which is the overarching company, which would be Manifest Labs in this situation, right? Fanatics then acquired Topps. They acquired, I believe they're acquiring Panini, if I remember it correctly.
Right.
And then they've got, there's one other that they acquired too that's I'm drawing a blank on. And so now they've got like college prospects they're putting out under Bowman. So now they're cross-connecting everything, right?
Yep.
And there's always going to be some people that go, that's not going to work. And it's like, and part of it is because they're stuck in the mentality of, yes, a year ago, if you thought that was an idea, you probably would have been like, yeah, that's not going to work, right? But now you've got people, it used to be that people would never want to buy college prospects or people that are not in the pros and stuff like that. People just didn't really buy it. And now, like Victor Wembanyama, who's got drafted to the San Antonio Spurs, #1 prospect since probably LeBron James, people are buying like crazy boxes that have his potential cards in there, even though it's not him in a Spurs uniform. So it's breaking all these barriers that have never happened before, where people said, oh, they won't buy those cards. And now they are, right? So the reality of it is, for people who say, oh, people won't buy this, they won't buy that, there's too many mints, there's too many. Bro, we are still writing the history of this, just as the sports trading card world is still writing the history of that. And that's been around for 100 years.
Yeah, it's been around for a while.
So, and we've been around for a few years, right? So it's like, so to me, what I love about it, the reason why I believe in you and everything, is the trust that people have built with you, right? Your community members trust you. And that's the biggest thing. So when people say, oh, well, you know, this person tried it and it didn't work, it's, did they build that trust first, right? You go out of your way to communicate with everybody. I swear to God, I feel like I see you talking to everybody on a regular basis. And it's like, you build that trust that then people go, hey, I'm willing to give him the chance, right? When not everybody else deserves that chance because they haven't built that trust, right? And so people know that you're not just building something and then you're just going to be like, okay, cool, I'm done with it and move on from it. Like, your whole goal since the time I first talked with you and everything was to have this Manifest Labs overarching, and then everything else, the IP underneath that, and to really expand that and to, you know, and make that as big as you possibly can be. And to me, and you asked me earlier, you said, what's the number one thing that people look for? And you said to me, it's energy. And I was like, yeah, excitement, energy. It's like, that's what people want. This space, like, when you're in the middle of a bear market, the last thing you want is no energy. You want energy. You want excitement. You want people talking about shit on the timeline. You want, even if people don't agree, if someone's like, hey, he's putting out too many mints, that's fine. Voice that. You can voice that. But the biggest thing is energy, and that's what we want. We're here to have fun, and that's what you keep making sure everybody's doing. Yeah,
no, and I think I made a joke. I was like, our holders have made more money than we have. I mean, if you think about it in perspective, Ring Runners was a 10K. 6,664 of them were mintable by the public. And we airdropped over $1 million. I mean, not $1 million, but like over $700,000 worth of Matic in value, receptive value for Ring Runners to our alpha holders, free, because they didn't have to pay for it. And I'm not even joking. The ROI on alpha it's probably, if we actually put it, and I know somebody's running the numbers right now, but I mean, at one point, alpha is a 19 Matic Mick. It was 4,500 Matic. Like, no one ever expected us to hold those type of floor precedents. And it's a conviction, and in the way that we go about and articulate and handle our business, and understand this is a business. Why I'm building it this way? Because I'm looking at it from an objective perspective. Like, yeah, I love the IP, I love alpha, and I love that, and we've got really cool things in the pipeline for everything. But also, as a business person, I need to have more IP. Like, you have to have more IP. Like, you just, like, you look at it, like, why be bottled in that one lane? Like, yeah, you can, like, the way I look at it is like, look, one of these could really, really blow up, and some of them could be very mediocre and just kind of be there. But the objective is obviously to have the opportunity. If you're not in the game, you can't participate. You can't be a part of an ecosystem, or even have the potential eyeball to say, hey, that looks really cool. I like the idea of it. So, like, let's see where we can take it, right? And I think that's what kind of like what we've been doing. Like, it's definitely, I run into people, especially founders, that are perplexed by it. Like, holy shit, how is this possible, dude? Like, how are you doing this? And I'm like, it's a lot. It is a lot. But it's what I live for. Like, dude, I wake up excited to be able to, like, flush these things out and bring really cool experiences to people. And, like, these guys they get worked up about it. Like, dude, like, this is exciting to us. Like, yeah, there's moments of the growing pains, and, like, there's just a ton of people piling in. And, like, to be honest with you, integrating Soul people, like the degen side of Soul, into like our Polygon ecosystem that are conditioned to this type of behavior that we've kind of been doing, has been a growing pain, to be completely honest. But slowly but surely, the Soul people are starting to get it. Like, oh, these guys have a different plan. Like, this is a different strategy. And, you know, we've been pretty fortunate, to be honest with you, with the results we have. Obviously, you've seen it, and everything we ripped went absolutely insane. I don't know if you asked me the Ring Runners question yet, but
yeah, we'll get into Ring Runners here in a second. I feel like, you know, a lot of it is, I'm excited to see the expansion, because to me, I've always said, I think, like, being a chain maxi just doesn't make a ton of sense to me. It's never really made a ton of sense to me. And to me, the way I look at it is, like, when we get to the point of, like, crypto having, like, mass adoption, like, people and NFTs having mass adoption, people are just going to want to buy something, and you're not necessarily going to care, like, what you're buying it on, right? Yeah. Like, if I have, even if I have, like, USDC in Sol, I feel like I should be able to buy a ETH project with that, right? Like because in my mind, I'm like, I don't know how the technicalities of that will work. Somebody else smarter than me will figure that out. But like, why can't that work, right? Like, there's no real reason why you can't have an auto conversion there. Yada yada yada. It does it for you. It's in my mind, I'm like, it's not that difficult. Somebody smarter than me will figure out how to do that. And so to me, I'm like, I envision down the road a marketplace, whether that's Magic Eden or whatever ends up being, of a marketplace where people can go on there and they can buy whatever the hell they'd like, and the chain won't matter. And it'll just tell you, hey, this is what it's going to cost. How you want to pay that, it's up to you, but this is what it's going to cost. And you just buy that, right?
Yeah.
And so whether you're using a credit card, whether you're using USDC, whether you're using Solana, Polygon, ETH, whatever, everything has a price in another chain. Like if something is 4,500 Matic, right? Then that's okay. Then that's whatever that would be. I don't know the exact math off the top of my head, but that would be like 3,700 USDC, right? Or that would be like, whatever that is, however many ETH, right? And it's like, so you should, in theory, be able to eventually just buy something in whatever like coin you want to use, but you should be able to buy whatever IP you want to buy with that, right? Yeah. And so that's, to me, this is how we get to that. Those growing pains is how we get to that. Because if we're not, until we get to that point, until we start removing a lot of this friction, we're not going to reach the total masses. Because currently it's still too difficult. But the way that we get there is working through some of that friction, and we need people like you that kind of force that conversation. Because now builders have to say, okay, hey, here are the problems that we have from stopping people from being able to truly just buy whatever the hell they want with whatever currency they want to buy it with, right? There's always going to be a solution. So some builders are going to be listening to this and going, well, the issue with what Marc is saying is that you would have this, and this problem. Okay, but there's a solution to that. I guarantee it. It's not, I won't be the one who finds it, but somebody else will be.
There's someone thinking.
Yeah,
sure.
Someone will find it. So, okay, so talk to me about, so we touched a little bit on Ring Runners. Why I guess did you decide to have Ring Runners be a Polygon project?
One, because of the gas fees, right? And I think there was already a representative project on Solana at the time, and obviously Bombaclot came before it. But like, we chose Polygon mostly because the economics. We could pass the savings to the consumer. They didn't have to pay all the transactional fees associated that are like notorious for play to earn, especially on like Ethereum. And I thought like it made the most sense because like they needed something really exciting, and then like there was no like big deal like 10K projects that were doing stuff like we were going to be planning on doing with the whole like play to experience aspect, earning aspect. And I was just thinking to myself, like, it only makes sense, to be honest, because like it's an L2 of ETH. It was going to be on ETH before. And I think the quality of the artwork, the way that it looks, just resonates with that particular chain. More so, it provides eyeballs to other chains. Because I had people tell me, like, Ring Runner's art's pretty dope, dude. Like, you could have dropped that on Sol. You could have done it on ETH or whatever. And I was just like, but Polygon made sense because, one, that's my home. And I've got to draw eyes, and I've got to put respect on it. Like, I just honestly have to put respect on Polygon and what they've done for me. They've changed my life. They've changed my family's life. And not to mention have impacted, like, economically impacted thousands of people that are in our ecosystem. And it just made sense to do it there natively. It just really just made sense. And I mean, we did history, dude. Like, I mean, literally history. In a matter of like 2 days, it was, a million Matic traded, which is actually insane. The price floor precedent being a 10K sellout in less than 30 minutes. I mean, it probably could have sold out sooner if the phases weren't as long, but it was like a 30-minute mint. And just like the amount of liquidity that we brought in from the chain, I mean, it was like $750,000 worth of sales in that particular window, like 3-day period of time, which is unprecedented on Polygon. Like, it just doesn't you don't see that, right? And to be able to pump like that for days and still doing very well right now. I mean, it's pulled down some because obviously it's priced, but it's sitting at a 3x floor. At one point it was at like, I think 6 or 7x from like mint price because it sold out in whitelist. And, it just, Polygon just made sense for us. Like, and I'm glad we did Polygon because look at the success we had on there. And once again, creating legitimacy, showing people what's possible, and people coming over like, damn, this is really the real deal. Like, these guys understand it. And then getting people to kind of like attach themselves to an ecosystem that has a massive amount of potential is what was the real plan, like showing them. Because I'm a builder and a founder, but I also like startups, and I also like the idea of like doing things that is unheard of. Because like that the whole idea, like there's no written rule book. There's no history book. I mean, there is some history obviously with the last 2 or 3 years, but like there's really no rule book on strategy. Like, let's be honest, like 2021 was just a lot of luck. Like, just be honest, perfect time, perfect storm. A lot of people didn't know what they were doing, just spaghetti on the wall, and shit just stuck, and people won big time. And then I think in year 2 it was like, okay, these are things we can still get away with, but like they're obviously bumps and bruises. And then year 3 is just like, shit ain't working, dude. Like, it's just not going to work that way no more. Now I'm in a phase where I'm like, I've seen all that, I've lived through that. What's truly possible? Let's push that agenda. Because every time I do a mint, trust me, my team's apprehensive, like, are we going to get flack for it? I'm like, dude, I don't give a shit. They're going to mint it. And the biggest issue is like, well, you know, liquidity, you know, you got ring runners going to pull liquidity. The mechanism allows you to play to earn. So at some point, we're providing liquidity to the ecosystem, driving traffic and activity, and then allowing people an intuitive experience. And we're doing it on a chain that literally prides itself in microtransactions, so that way you avoid gas fees. Like it's like a no-brainer. It's an obvious solution to the issue right there. And it gives you something to do on the chain, because there's really nothing exciting on Polygon as far as like the play to earn side of it, right? And everything else is a PFP, or it has like this boring utility. Like they want something to do consistently, right? To challenge each other. So
okay, so here's my question for you from there, because I know there's going to be some people who listen to this and go, okay, so we've been in the space long enough to know that people only have 24 hours in a day, right? So when you've got this project and you 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 got this project, and at the same time, because you're doing these low liquidity mints, it's not like you're bringing in, like in the last week, Azuki brought in $37 million from Elementals, right? And I'm not knocking them for that. That's awesome. That's incredible that they can bring that in for their business. And at the end of the day, you need money to sustain yourself. I get that. Every business in the world needs that. So, but if I'm playing devil's advocate here, I would go, okay, so you're not bringing in that, right? When you talk about the $4 million in revenue, you're not talking about $4 million in profit, right? You're talking about that in revenue. So in terms of the, you know, the realistic aspect of how do you keep growing what Manifest Labs can do? Because at some point, you know, I'm a big 8 hours of sleep kind of guy and everything like that, because I know it keeps me fresh. It keeps me able to work, you know, and be as creative as I need to be and everything like that. I do also know that the demands of NFT projects are crazy, because you can only talk about mint price for so long until somebody goes, hey, I bought at, you know, whatever, 18. I bought Bombaclot at 18 or 19 and we're at 8, so I'm down right? Yeah, of course. And so that person is like, hey, I need to know that this is going to go to 40. I need to know that this is going to go to 60, right? And then the person who buys at 60 is going to be like, I need to know this is going to 100, right? And so the expectations change, right? Now they've seen that you can sell it out. Everybody knows that. So how do you view expanding, you know, what Manifest Labs is able to do? Because obviously as there's more on the plate, there's, you know, still only the same amount of hours in a day. And so do you look at this as like, you know, I know VC investing and stuff like that, it's hard to talk about until something happens or, you know, whatever. But do you look at that as like, you know, that's going to be a way that we raise money in order for us to like grow what we're doing, grow our capabilities, add to the team and stuff like that, so we can keep doing what we're doing and be able to scale it properly? Because obviously the only other alternative to VC investing basically is to go and do another mint, but a much higher mint price. But then that kind of goes against what you've been doing by the low liquidity sort of mints and things like that. So what are your thoughts on all of that in terms of funding all of this and then adding to the Manifest Labs team and all of that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think the thing for us is like, we're very aware that at some point we're going to need more resource because of the way that we've scaled. We absorbed that the project that was essentially on its way to being the Region 79 was a project that the founders wanted to walk away from. One of the community, and I'm mentioning this because it leads me to a point, and then one of the community members reached out to us. They had a game, everything lined up. We absorbed the entire company with the gaming infrastructure, the developers, as well as the illustrators and the team that was associated with it into our ecosystem. And here was the thing. Like, could we raise $1 million? Probably, like 100%. But right now we're building that trust that we can do a little with a lot with a little, right? We're slowly incrementally building that trust and continuity in our community. So when we do make that ask, because I don't want to, like, the problem with venture funding, VC funding, and like you have to answer to somebody, right? And it may go against, like, you may have counterintuitive objectives at that moment, because like they want ROI, they want their money back. You're trying to cater to your community. Prime example, look at Doodles, right? Just great example of like where those two things kind of don't marry. And for us, it was like, all right, let's incrementally do it. I'll bootstrap most of it out of my own pocket, and like just slowly build up to it. Once we built enough continuity and trust, then we can look to do larger raises, so that way we can start to like power pump our infrastructure a bit. And like with Ring Runners, I think collectively, if you include royalties and what we've like took on mints, I think it's right around $500,000 with a 4 million in rev, you know, and I don't know what, I think we have like 30,000 NFTs in our ecosystem, which is insane to think. So like right now there's a machine being built, and I think it's self-sufficient, will allow itself to kind of like continue to grow. But I think at some point there's conversations. I turned down a $500,000 VC fund, VC offer. And since then I've had a 3X one from that point on, to be completely honest. And we're looking at quite a few different things, but the idea was like, do we need it now, right? Do I want a hyperdrive? Yeah, I want a fast tracking, like get things going. But I also like the organic bootstrap way, like the grungy, getting in the dirt, like down there in the trenches and building it. And it builds more respect. People see it, right? They understand what you're trying to do and accomplish. And I think for us, like from an objective standpoint, like we get to a point where our team is pretty big right now. Like we've got a robust team. Like we've got graphics guys, we got illustrators, we got animators. I mean, when we start really pumping stuff out, it's going to be really cool to see some of these things. Because right now people are just seeing, like I said, there's nothing exciting about seeing a house with just the frame up. Like that doesn't excite you. But as soon as they put the roof on it and put the walls on it, like, oh shit, now I'm starting to see what's happening. And I think we're in that particular phase right now. Like we are very aware we need resource. And I think Ring Runners was a way for us to get a little bit of resource to kind of like accelerate some things. And like I said, I turned down the $500,000 offer before. We've got a couple fillers out there from VC right now. And, you know, we're looking at a couple different things, but the objective is to obviously cater to our community so that they're the people we answer to, not to an outside entity. And in a perfect world, do I want to be able to go raise $25 million on my own and be able to do it on ourselves and then say the community helped us do it? Absolutely. And I think that's where my goal is eventually to get, not saying I'm going to raise 25 million, but what I'm saying is like, I want to do it from the community. I want to bootstrap it with the community. They got skin in the game. They've been with the process and we grow. And then once we get to a point where we need that outside liquidity to be able to scale from the Web 2 front, I think then it's when it makes sense. You know, like I think one of the top questions I get consistently when I go into these meetings and talk about investment is like, where's your end goal and like where's your end game, right? And we talk about the same things: manga, live action animations, and then you've got you know, merchandising and physical goods and stuff like that. And I'm just thinking like, where do we fit in the space and where do we go from there? And then how much liquidity we'll need to be able to execute those things at a high level. And I think that's where knowing like we're not building for now, but for later, it kind of goes into that whole conversation. Like, when do you need to start taking liquidity? Like, when do you need to start raising? And I think Ring Runners was the proof of concept, once again, that we know what we're doing from a marketing branding perspective. And then two, we know how to drive engagement and activity and experience. Now we need to start raising capital, because now we're in that window where now we need to be hyper focused on engaging and development side of things. Because I've said it before, Q3 for us is all about the underlying utility and development. So we need capital. We need to be able to flush those things out and accelerate them, because it's a ticking clock. Like, I don't want my people to go out and get rugged by other projects. I want them to be happy inside their ecosystem and then have all the experiences to keep them there. Like, you don't need to go look at another mint. Every single day you talked about it. Like, I see people from Seoul talking about Bitcoin, talking about ETH. Like, now it's more collaborative than it's ever been. Why not have an ecosystem that is that embodies that same idea? And then look at it from this perspective. Polygon doesn't have a lot of liquidity. Solana does have a ton of liquidity. You marry those two in, you create a very robust opportunity and instance where something can truly be successful. That's why Bombaclot was successful in Seoul, because we had early investors from Polygon that were in our projects that brought liquidity into Seoul. And then we had Seoul people that got into it as well from a low point that allowed maximum upside, and the speculation was ridiculous. So for us, I think, we're looking at, like, is there investor conversation going on? Absolutely. Are we aware that we're probably going to need more resources? Absolutely. And are we working on some very intuitive ways to do that without having to take money from investors? Absolutely. I think our focus point is to empower our community. I think that's the goal. And I think some point or another we'll probably cross that line where we're going to need some cash injection to really take this thing to the next level. As you can see with some of the biggest brands, but I want to stay true to like what our hallmark is. Like, we're grown by the community. Like, this is possible because of Manifest Labs community. Like, they made this possible. And I think that narrative, that story is what inspires people to be a part of it. And like, that's why they're deeply rooted, because everything that we've had is a success story, right? The question is like, when do you have your first falter, right? Like, when is that going to happen? But I think we've built so much conviction that they don't even look at it as a loss. Like it's a win for most people that were in earlier. And you mentioned like you can only talk about floor price for so long because like, people buy at different gesture points. But I think given the amount of time that we've been established and what we're currently doing, it gives them still hope and opportunity to essentially grow from outside of where they've been at, right? Even if you bought Bombaclot at 18 sold, like I'm confident that we'll be at a 40, 50 sold floor. Like I'm very confident in that because I understand what we're about to deliver. And the expectation associated with that should already be built and instilled into our community. So like all we need to do is make sure that we are utilizing the resources correctly and we're putting it in action as soon as possible. Like also being very mindful that like, if I don't do something and they're waiting, guess what they're going to go do? They're going to go spend their money somewhere else anyways. So why would what's the difference than me doing it and having a capable team? It's just about the IP. Like I'm not over promising. That's the trick. If you overpromise and do multiple mints, then you're really out of your way. I underpromise everything at the very bare minimum. The only reason why we gave Bombaclot so much is because it demanded it. $1 million in revenue in 7 days on a chain that didn't know about us and was a 3.25 mint. Like, of course I'm going to have to put some resources behind it. But the reality is when we deploy an IP, like the one I just talked to you about, the Colcer cats, that whole idea is that we want low economic impact and then we underpromise everything. So if it does really, really well, then we can say community, what would you guys like? What would you want to do with this? And then we can kind of take it from there. And that way we don't like strap ourselves resource wise to some particular IP. We allow the community to kind of build it up and curate it because Bombaclot's crazy. Those guys are nuts. And yet, you know, we raised only $20,000 and it was the worst. Like Solana was dumping. I mean, it was rough. And then we started to step back and think about it. I was like, this is a great opportunity. We made more on royalties on secondary with that project than we did from the mint. And then we're thinking, what can we fast track to give them some utility immediately, right? Excitement, the bomber game, right? That's like a degen kind of strategy game, nostalgic to Minesweeper. Then you're giving them the Bomba kits. They're getting an airdrop that we talked about. Like there's just so really, really cool things that we can do it at a low cost that they're like experience centric that allows them to be able to do it. And I think being very cognizant of what we're offering from that perspective mitigates us overextending us from a resource standpoint because we just know what it costs. Like, all right, these things are high efficiency, high impact, and we don't have to worry about people exerting ourselves from a resource standpoint. So like I've just been really good at, like I mentioned on our first podcast, my mom taught me how to make a lot with a little, right? So like even if I have $500,000, to me it's really $100,000. How do we maximize $100,000 and still have equity, still have cash flow? And that's where we kind of like been. That's why we've been very successful so far. And I think once we get our legs under us, once those walls are already done and the roof's on this house, I mean, dude, it gets crazy from here. Like we've got some really cool stuff, but you know, liquidity is a thing. We definitely know we need it. And we're not going to slow down at all. Like I'm not apologetic about not slowing down. I think that it's imperative that we do it now before the bull runs here. So that way, when it is here, the people will truly benefit from us doing it. And it will, and you know, it takes a bit of courage to do what we're doing. Cause I mean, would I have done this 2 years ago? No, it just wouldn't have been allowed. Like people would have fudded me out for being a griefer or something. But the thing is, it's because of the way that we overly communicate is why it's an unheard of precedent. That's why we've been able to accelerate. Usually just hearing my voice consistently day after. I think my community is kind of going through withdrawals now because I haven't been on Spaces in a couple of days. But because one, I'm really been in the think tank in the hyperbolic chamber, discovering what the next step is from a developmental standpoint, and then how do we best utilize the resources we currently have kind of like curated in this previous mint where $750,000, almost $400,000 generated by ring runners. And now what can we do? What can we accelerate? And that's like where our focal point is right now with that stuff. So I think at some point we'll get there. I think it's just about, can we go raise $1 million, $2 million? Absolutely. Will we do it? Probably. And those will probably happen within the next 2 minutes or so once we get into that window. But yeah, it's just, we need liquidity. And I think we found really cool ways to do it. I think most founders want the money up front just so that they can do whatever. But like, we know cost. We know how much these things cost, like really know how much this stuff costs. It doesn't cost as much as people try to exaggerate it to be. But I think like the expense of like having your mods and all your team and then your infrastructure and your overhead. But if you run it lean, mean, I think you can accomplish quite a bit with very little. When I see people raise $2-3 million, I'm just like, for what? Show me where that 2-3 million outside of cars and buying condos. Like, show me where that $2-3 million goes. Like, let me see what you're doing with $2-3 million, because they're not utilizing it on NFT development. Like, it's not. Let's just be honest. Like, it's the truth. Like, if I'm going to take $1 million, you best believe I'm about to go ham and we're about to drop products left and right. I don't take what I don't need. It's like when I go to the table and like I like, you know, a lot of people just, you know, we use this as an analogy all the time. People eat with their eyes, right? So when I'm going to the dinner table, I like ham, chicken, turkey, all this, but I'm going to eat just chicken right now. Like, that's all I need. I don't need everything on my plate. And a lot of people go bring in $2 million and they're just like, all right, let me go take care of my own selfish needs first. Then let me figure out what we can do for the community from just a small, and then just turtle it out. Like, no, that's not how we're doing the playing the game. We're taking the least amount that we need, getting it done, and then, all right, go back and do it again, and then continue to do that. It shows thanks to the community. We give them time to like kind of process it. And I think every mint that we've done in our ecosystem has provided value to the holders that have been there from the beginning. And each incremental ecosystem that we attach to it then benefits from it even more, right? So I just think, like, a lot of Bombaclot people, guess what they benefit from? Ring runners. Like, all of them benefited from. So maybe some of those guys were down from the all-time high on Bombaclot, but guess what they did do? They did mint ring runners. A vast majority of them did, and they profited from it. So they kind of balanced it out, right? So I look at it from that perspective. Do I think all of our projects are going to pump at the same time? No, but I think there was a period of time for like a week when Polygon, we were 1, 2, and 3. Like, we were generating so much volume. And I think from a bit, like, if you're a holder and you look on it, and just like Utes and D-Gods, we'll use them as an example, and you see Utes and D-Gods pumping, you're ecstatic as a holder of Dust Lab products. Like, you're just like, yeah, hell yeah, we're winning. That's how I think. And I want them to have that diversity and have multiple IPs to kind of resonate with. And, you know, each mint, we look to be a bit more aggressive in our capital raise because we know that resources are a necessity for us to be able to continue to facilitate this growth. I mean, I got an office space in Texas now. You know, we get it. We know what's going to happen. And I think the next 2 mints will probably be higher economic raises from what we've currently done from standardization. But still, from a metric perspective, they'll always be significantly cheaper than what everybody else is doing, because we're very mindful that we want people, because we understand the current sentiment associated with the market economics. So like, we've got there's a lot of stuff entwined to it, man. It's just really hard to like conceptualize it because it's not something, I don't have a playbook, man. There's no NFT for Dummies book that I can go look at and be like, I need someone, like, I don't even know who to talk to sometimes, because it's like, dude, I know some guys that have some really successful projects, and they're like, dude, what you're doing, I would never do. I don't know how you do it. Like, it's crazy, man. Like, we're in
uncharted territory. I mean, that's the reality of it, right? Like, you know, when I think about like late 2021, it was like every project that minted was bringing in like $5, $6, $7, $8 million, right? And that was just on Solana. You had ETH projects that were bringing in some crazy figures, right?
Yeah.
And it's like what you mentioned a few minutes ago of like the whole, you know, you could do a ton with that. There were definitely times we didn't really hold projects to any sort of standard back then, because there weren't like the unwritten laws that we kind of have now in the space. We kind of have the laws written now of like, yo, we kind of expect you to do some shit, right? But we're expecting people to do some shit who aren't bringing in a ton, right? And so it is that thing of like, you know, it's interesting to see kind of how the space has developed over time. And, you know, but again, you know, somebody who brings in $3, $4, $5 million, like, you know, there's a lot that you can do with that. And the number one question I would have for them in that instance is like, so, you know, what are you doing with that, right? Like, what are you know, are you burning a bunch of money on dev work that's going to lead to an announcement that nobody gives a shit about? Like, how much are you talking with your community? Like, the biggest thing that I've always liked about you is that you talk with the community. You talk with people on a regular basis. And to me, you need to have that conversation to know what does the space need at that moment, right? And there's a lot of times that I think this has been the biggest, you know, fuck up that a lot of people had in late 2021 and throughout 2022 was that they would bring in all this massive amount of money, right? And then they would go, I don't know what the space needs. So they would throw $50,000 at this, $100,000 at this. People were charging crazy rates for things that they were working on. And hey, make your money. I get it, you know, whatever. But like, people were charging far more than what they probably deserved at that moment. And then the work that they were putting out and the announcements that people were coming out with, nobody gave a shit about. And so it was like, hey, you just spent $250,000 on this that nobody cared about. And all of a sudden that money depleted very, very quickly, right? And then on top of that, the underlying coin going down in value and not enough people stabling at that time, right? And all of a sudden it was like that, $5-6 million became like
Nothing.
$250,000 real quick, right? And so I think the nice part about the space now is the maturity there of people realizing, hey, like, be a little bit more conservative with what you're doing, in terms of like, make sure you cover your ass a little bit, make sure you got,
Right.
Money to keep the lights on, right? Don't do something like, if you're going to put out an announcement, make sure people actually want it, that's another thing. Right. And so the space is maturing in that way. And I think it's a cool way to see kind of how you've taken, a little bit, you've done a lot with it, kind of the overarching ways that you're growing Manifest Labs has been exciting to watch. But okay, so you've talked a lot about how you've taken this 3-year approach, right? Like even in the first podcast episode, you laid out the whole like timeline of how you got into ETH and how you had plans for an ETH project. And then, everything kind of changed when, Kevin Rose dropped Proof and all of that, right? And so if people haven't seen that first episode with you, they should go watch that.
Right.
But you've been working on all of these ideas for the last 3 years, right? So but I think there's always, it's that whole Muhammad Ali thing of, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face, right? So now that you've been actually dropping these things that you've been planning for a long period of time, what has been the biggest realization about being a project founder that you may not have expected that you've realized over the last few months? In a way that you've either grown, your scope of the project, or the way that you've grown, what you have to do as a project founder. What has been just that huge realization that you've had?
I think for me is that it's kind of crazy that this is my perspective. I spent all that time from the consumer's perspective, trying to understand human behavior and their nature and seeing what people want. So when we built in Manifest Lab, how we're building, we build based on the consumers, like the consumer side, like what would I wanted if I was a part of the project? What would I find exciting? What would make me like be all in on something in a brand personally? And what I've learned as a founder is that everything that I'm doing, hyper-tracked, over-communicating, very transparent, providing experience over and over is never enough. It's never enough. And I think what I've learned is that it created maybe an unrealistic, unprecedented associated with the way that we deliver, to where now the bar set so high in our ecosystem, people expect another mint. They expect another announcement instantaneously because we move so fast. Because like the status quo before was like you wait 3, 4, 5 weeks, maybe months before something even tangible is even released. But now things are just so much different, and in the way that we operate has created like this pressure really to accelerate a lot of things fairly quickly. And it feels like an eternity to them guys, but like dude, it's not. Like it's just standard, right? It's 3 months in the build, staking's rolling, we've got all these things kind of like coming out slowly. And I think for me, one, realizing that like the Web3 place never sleeps. Someone's on the other side of the world waking up on the next day that's already ready, hungry, mad, pissed, excited. And then people on this side are sleeping, right? And you deal with them in waves. And I think it definitely is mind-bending because like it's one of the most difficult things to understand. But if the way that I can conceptualize, I watch a lot of corporate structures like seminar and thesis and try to kind of get in my brain like, all right, run this like a corporation in a sense. Don't detach yourself from Web3 and what it means and the principles that make you successful, but understand that you're running it from an organizational standpoint. And I think the growing pains for me was like conceptualizing the whole time differences, because like your demand comes in waves of 8-hour waves. So you just have to be prepared for it, have people in place to do it, to mitigate risk and complaints and like being able to provide concise information. But then I think like for us, it's just like we've had so much success, people just expect it. So like now it's just like, all right, what do we do next that they will appreciate, that can provide the value necessary to do it? And it's just like those are the growing pains that we kind of suffer in this particular moment. Like, okay, we did this, we did that, we did this working. Now what do we do for the people that got in at the top, right? How do we solidify that? And I think for me, that's like one of the things that I kind of like not struggle with, but like it's in my head constantly. I'm thinking, all right, I need to get something to these guys to be able to do it, but I want to make sure it's quality. But we're also trying to stay on track with our original build plan, is to get our IP out first. Get all the IP out, then we go into the underlying utility. Like, I don't think that they'll lose it because as we're building houses, like if you ever look at a development, they'll start a house, then you'll get the walls up, and then the roof goes on, and guess what happens? They've already started the next house. They're putting the cement down. And once that roof up, by the time this one has walls and windows, they're already doing the same thing with this one. And then so on and so forth. So I'm building like a builder, like a plan builder. And each independent IP is then slowly being built into its infrastructure as we're building the next IP. And some people think that's really hard to do, but it's not it's not cookie cutter. But like I said, under promise and over deliver. So most of the strategies implemented into it are kind of similar in theory. So that way we can avoid having to be stressed. We're just really duplicating each individual one and then adding our own intuitive, exciting spin on that in that particular project. So for me, it's just like, all right, let me think about this. What do we need to do to mitigate stress, which is really hard in the space because demand is always at the highest and people want engagement. They're either going to get it from me or they're going to get it from someone else. So being very aware that I have to make a choice. Either I allow them to go have that experience and go outside of my ecosystem, or I just ante up and be like, all right, I'm going to give them the experience. It's avoid them going outside of this ecosystem and crawling back and liquidating our assets to be able to cover for the expense that they cost themselves going into an essential situation. So we made a decision that we were going to focus on experience as our primary utility and focus on getting our IP out to be able to drive engagement, excitement, and then at the same time, then start to flush out the underlying utility for each independent IP that gives it substance and continuity. And then that's our strategy. But I had to really look at myself in the mirror and be like, are you prepared to be the focus of their entertainment? Right? It's like when you have a kid, like the first, 8-7 years of their life, like you are their entertainment. That's how they eat. That's how they're not going in the fridge on their own. And these are like my children. Like they're in that infancy perspective where now they're dependent on me for everything, for their eat, their prosperity. And I know that versus saying, hey, we're in this alpha community and we're just going to shove you guys out different projects and you could get rugged, you could probably get burned. I'm just like, no, we won't do that anymore. We'll just focus on providing them the IP and excitement. And I think that at that moment was the pivot shift for us where I was just like, all right, guys, we're going to be the ones delivering the projects. We're not going to go expose. Like, do they have an alpha community within our ecosystem? Yeah, to talk about projects, Bitcoin, or in those slow projects and such we talked about, like the Bodagos. But the reality is I want to reduce their exposure to risk outside of our ecosystem by protecting them, but providing the utility. And people are like, oh, well, aren't you going to dilute your IPs? Not if you look at it from that perspective. If you look at it from an organism perspective, it all works together because we don't take liquidity. We're not draining liquidity from each project because of the low economics or because we allow them to mint for free. And then we try to remove them because most of them find ways to get whitelisted, but we want them to bring in other people in from the other outside in, right? So just understanding the demand side of it. Now people are like, I'm only doing manifest projects for now on, and understanding the risk associated with that, as well as like being aware of the demands and like the growing pain that comes with like having to show up next day. Cause like now everybody's like, you guys have an anime project coming out. We're excited for it. You guys got this project coming out. Now we understand like, all right, it's our responsibility to provide the entertainment. It's our responsibility to like continue to like drive engagement with these people. And, I think that's what like, I think that's like my biggest things, like managing, mitigating risk. And then obviously like understanding that now we are the focus of their attention as a child would be to an adult. And we need to make sure that we continue to curate that relationship and continuously keep them engaged because like because here's a study, right? Like you've got all these people in this particular ecosystem that have been trained to a particular behavior pattern with the way that we articulate and how we manage. And then you implement new people. Over time, if I keep teaching the same people the same thing and you implement new people, they'll teach the people for me and I won't have to do it. So I've spent the last 3 months curating with these people. And now that we've interjected Solana people that are oblivious to how we operate, I don't have to go on the server and preach multiple times. These people innately are doing it. Right. So that understanding that we've created that symbiotic relationship with me and the holders that we've built so far. Now I don't have to work as hard to tell people how we operate and what the plans are and all this, because the people, as soon as they come in the server, the people are educating them like, hey, dude, we don't rock that way. It's positivity. Yeah, things move up and down, but that's the life. And then obviously this is Manifest Labs and this is what we are and what we're about. And it's taken a huge amount of pressure off me and our team, obviously, me being the voice. I thank God we got David. He's been great, as a voice for us on the Ring Runners account. But like just in general, like I think it just makes it so much easier because like that was like one of our biggest issues. Like how do we manage expectation in this particular situation, and how do we mitigate risk for our communities as an Owlpha community? Because like you can't control other founders. The person I hold accountable every day is the person that's sitting right here. So I know what they can expect from me, and they should know what I can expect from me, which grieves. That's one of the reasons why we've been so successful with the mints, because people know who I am. If I go shill another mint and they're founder of Rugs, that's bad on me. It's bad on our brand. It's no way that I can protect my children, right? Like you could prepare them, educate them as much as you want to, but if they go out in the world and something happens to them, like that's life. But at the same token, being very aware that like, okay, now my asserted responsibility right now is to kind of cultivate a relationship in this community, educate them, and then provide experience while we have that moment, while we're in this moment. It's kind of like our focal point of what like I've realized, and like kind of like removing some of the stressor points that I was dealing with before when we were trying to build this thing. Cause like it gets kind of crazy. Like these people are like win. And it's different when you have one project and there's wins, but when you have 5 projects and it's win times 50, it's very loud, but it's exciting because there's a demand there, meaning that there's a prosperity opportunity for products and deliverables. And like, that's why I get so much consumer feedback, good and bad. People tell me what they feel all the time. And I think it's a two-way street. So like, I think from a founder understanding that when you do something, when people pay for something, you better be ready to take on their opinion about what you did, because they've spent their money. So they're going to give you their feedback on it. And just taking those instances and like learning from them and like digesting it, and then doing articulate diagnosis of like what situations are, how can we get better. I think those are like the keys for me from a founder perspective, what we've learned. And having such a dense population of active buyers and engagement allows me to study so fast, because then I know how to pivot. Like, all right, that didn't do that well. They didn't respond well to that. Let's adjust that. Like, this is what companies pay millions of dollars to do. And we've got 10,000 users condensed into a server where we can have conversation, we can test things, we can theorize and see it in live time and see reaction. It's a blessing. It's a blessing and a curse at the same time, because it's a double-edged sword, but it helps us quite a bit. And I think, that's what I've been like really in the chamber about, trying to understand like human behavior. Like, what can I do to really get to them? Because I read a lot of literature on the human psyche, and then the consumer behavioral habits and things of that nature, because that's what NFTs are, right? We eat with our eyes in this ecosystem, hype, speculative. And I'm thinking like, how do we really get to that next level? What do I need to do to really put myself in the driver's seat in this situation? And I think we've figured out a recipe for success, and it comes with its growing pains, like I said, but I think those are the things that I like personally as a founder have found to be very, not difficult, but challenging at times. But we found ways to mitigate quite a bit of that, because we just intuitively, like we're very aware of where we're at, like who we are. So we literally lean into that. Like, you lean into the pressure versus like trying to peel back. We're always on offense no matter what. And I think, what we've accomplished in that 3-month time is pretty unprecedented. But I think at this point, it's about establishing rapport with our consumers, because I think that's why we like most founders don't build a rapport on hype mints, because you don't build continuity. It's just hype driven. We spend a lot of time curating relationships. That's why we have so much floor continuity. So like when you drop a new mint and you don't have any continuity, people will either sell it out or like sell it down, and then you have to curate afterwards. We don't have to do that. So like just finding those issues that you usually find with like new projects with founders, we don't have to deal with that, because we can deploy a new IP, which is a new product. People love it. They get excited about it. It pumps. New people come into it because they're excited about it. And then they're like, I'm underexposed to manifest. Let me get other projects. So we found the solution to some of the biggest issues that founders have. And I think that's like one of the like intuitive ways we've kind of like curated such great relationships with the people that we have currently in our ecosystem. It's wild actually to see it, man.
So here's my question for you on top of that. So the thing I always, I don't know if worry would be the word, maybe, is that I know this space is mentally demanding and physically demanding in a lot of ways, right? And so, I look at it and I go, okay, you've been the project has been out for essentially, or the beginning of the IP of Manifest Labs has been out for 3 months, right? You've been working on it for a long time, but it's been public for the last 3 months, right?
Yeah.
And so obviously I want you to be sitting here a year from now, just as fresh as you are today, just as pepped up in the mornings as you are. And
Right.
you were texting me first thing in the morning. I texted you last night and I was like, how about 10 a.m.? You were like, let's go earlier. How about 9 a.m.? And I was like, all right, fuck it. Let's do it. Right.
Yeah.
So I want you to be just as energetic a year from now. So what are you doing to take care of your mental? What are you doing to take care of your physical? How are you taking care of Mr. Mint so that you can provide for everybody the way that you want to provide?
I think it goes back to self-development and duplication, right? So I'm inspiring and entitling people in our ecosystem to replicate myself in the same sentiment by educating them, by socially empowering them with the ability to articulate our vision concisely like I am. Because I can't always talk in every room. I can't speak on every space. I can't do that. So really my primary objective is to find micro me's, to find people that can exhibit the same nature and behavior that I do on a consistent basis, that align with my particular structure and goals, that I can duplicate myself in pockets over. That way I don't have to do everything. I mitigate my exposure, but also have maximum oversight. The military thing is about duplication, right? And then you look at it from, I said I was the colonel, right? I'm the top of the tree. And then I've got my majors, then I've got my sergeants, right? And then I've done that structurally so that way I can, once again, mitigate the exposure that I have consistently. I don't have to do spaces every day now. I've got somebody that can articulate, that can vocalize very effectively and gets the message across, and very exciting, and does it. Maybe he's not me, but he can do it. So my goal is, because one, having days off is very, when you're looking to be $100 million company, I just say it out loud. That's what I say it on our space, because I believe in manifestation and alchemy. We want to be $100 million company. To understand, to operate at that corporate level and have that much infrastructure, I need to start to think like that now, but also being pushing myself to kind of grow out of my shoes that we're currently in. And the way that is through duplication. I have to duplicate myself to be able to step away from a particular role. I master one particular space, an attribute of our particular ecosystem, and I hand it off and teach somebody how to manage it. And then I go to the next one and learn and master that one, and I hand it off and teach somebody, continue to do that. And then when I step back, now I've got 4 or 5 masters that learn what I just taught them, and all I have to do is manage them and mitigate risk and distress, and trying to be a smooth, frictionless ecosystem as possible. Will it always work? Absolutely not. And we'll have breakdowns. That's just the way even the military, one of the largest organisms on the earth, has issues every day. But for me, I think duplicating myself and educating people to be able, and aligning the people that articulate the way that I do, operate at a certain level, and have high frequency efficiency. Those are things I look for, because you don't, I always tell people, my brother works for Apple. I don't, I sit in his pocket and listen to their leadership calls and what they talk about. And I'm just thinking to myself, they don't really hire people based on education. It's all about translatable skills, right? So if I want a corporation, I'm not looking for a guy with a master's degree in X, Y, and Z. I'm looking for a guy that has translatable business working experience. What you work good with people. You're a great community person. You have this, blah, 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 this. I look for that. I look for people that are outspoken, that are hungry, that are not worried about being dealing with certain type of situations or adversity. Those are things I look for. And that's the way that I think I want to build the infrastructure on how we operate and bring in people. I look for translatable. You don't have to be super educated to work with us. What we care about most is does your working experience translate to what we're trying to acquire and what we're trying to be and drive for? And I think that's the reason why I think a year from now, I'll be the same person, because I will have duplicated myself at least 4 or 5 times from now. And they're not going to be verb for verb for me, but there'll be people that you'll be that dude knows how to throw down. He knows how to talk. He knows the vision. And I can just do what I do from a presidential standpoint, just come in and give you guys the grand speech and monologue, hey, we're here to win, and we've got a plan, and we've got a passion to do it. And I'm just aligning myself with passionate people, man. That's it. If you don't align with that, we're not the organization for you. I'm up early every single day, putting the fire to everybody's backs. Trust me, they're oh shit, he's up. I'm yeah, what's going on? Where we're at with this. I like to be consistently updated, because I think that's imperative. Over communicate to me. I don't care if you got to be out of pocket for 3 hours. Just let me know, because this is my livelihood. This is my family involved into it. And my family is not only just my blood and my children, my wife. My family is the community and people that have invested in what we're doing. And for me, I take that very seriously. So when they come in, you get due notice. Hey, don't play around here. 2FA, everything's authenticated. Don't risk compromising our server, our business, our entity. Don't compromise yourself. Be very mindful of what you say, and just being very, very aware, cognizant. It's about personal development. It's huge. The lack of business acumen and professionalism in the space is very bad. And when the dust settles, there'll be a lot of people on the floor that just didn't make it because they didn't realize where we're at. 4 years from now, professionals, people that understand business and how they transcend, are the ones that they're gonna win big time. And I just don't think we can just flock around. Everybody can be Gary Vee. Like, that just doesn't work, man. Like, he's who he is because he is a unicorn. And I think everybody wants to be the Gary Vee on Spaces. Like, they want to be that. I think professionalism is what the mass adoption is about. Professionalism, like, you have to articulate in a certain pattern. And I think we look for people that only exhibit a certain behavior pattern. If you don't, you just don't. You're not with what we're looking for. Always about translatable skills. And I think the key for us is going to be duplication. I think we're finding that now early on. And I think a year from now, man, I don't even know what it's going to be crazy to think, but you will see me slowly find people to fill certain positions, but I'm going to be hyper accurate. I think that's the key to our success. I was talking to one of my mentors, and he was like, what would you pinpoint to be your success point here? And I was like, my communication. My communication is the reason why we're winning. He was like, exactly. It's not about the brands. It's not the IPs. It's not the products and upside or hype. It's you. So drive off of that. Now, you can only leverage that for so long, but at some point you need to continue to duplicate it so that way you can be better at something else, right? And you find the people that are great at that. So we're currently looking for people that can articulate at a high level, that are professional, that understand what we're trying to do. And, I think that's what's going to separate us from the pack. I think that's just what we are. I mean, like I said, I'm not trying to be Gary Vee. I'm not trying to be that guy. I'm not trying to be me, what we're trying to build. And what we're trying to build has not been done yet. So it's kind of crazy, honestly.
Yeah, no, it's something that, we use the term all the time, let them cook, right? Yeah. And I think that expression works in a few different ways. You have to, before people will let you cook, you got to build that trust and that communication with people so that they know that if you went ghost for a week, they need to know that, like, they don't need to panic during that time. Right. And I think what happens with a lot of projects is, to really build great things, it does take time, right? Yep. Like, and people got to understand there's only 24 hours in a day. And I'm always a big believer. I think it's great when I hear people taking a break, if you go get, dinner with your wife, I want you to go do those things. If you guys go for a walk and you leave your phone at home, I want you to do those things. It's good to have that mental reset, right? And so, I like those kind of things, but there's also the other aspect of, people need to know that, like, somebody has built that trust with the community that when they do take a mental refresh, that people are like, hey, we're cool with that. We want you to have that. Right. And so, one of the things that I always look for in success of people is how do they delegate? How do they find those soldiers that kind of work for them, that kind of carry out the things that they don't need to do anymore, right? Maybe they did those things at the beginning, because you're in the trenches and you're getting to work and everything like that. But over time, how can you delegate the things that really aren't the best use of your time, right? And so, that's always one of the hardest things to try to figure out. But once you nail that, it's like, then it gives you the time to work on the big brain ideas instead of kind of doing the manual grunt work that, like, needs to be done, but probably isn't best suited for you to be doing. Right. And so it's like, then people can just let you cook. So right now it's like, you're laying the framework, you're laying the, you're getting the IP out there and everything like that. Then you're getting the capital, you're getting the resources, everything ready to go. And then you line up the people that can help carry out the different things that you need to do so that you can cook. And that's the part that, like, that's what I really look for in terms of, like, when I get excited about a project, is I'm like, do they have the framework to truly be successful? Do they have the ability to take their hands off of some things and let somebody who's great at what they do be great at what they do? But then do they also even have the ability to find that person to begin with, right? And so those are the things that I always look for, because at the end of the day, that's always going to be, that's not just the key for success in Web3, that's the key for success in any business, is do you have the ability to grow? Do you truly have the ability to, expand yourself? Because there's only so much time in a day, right? And so, when you look at, like, I mean, hell, when you watch Shark Tank, when you watch all these different shows, what are they investing in? They're not investing in the company. They're investing in the person who is at the top of that company to be able to figure out the solutions to the problems that come up, because there's always going to be new problems. There's always going to be, just as a few weeks ago, when you were on the podcast, we're talking about Bombaclot. before you minted, right?
Right.
And so it's the whole thing of like what's going to happen, and you're speculating, but we truly don't know, right? And then it runs up to 18 SOL. Now it's new problems, right? How do you make sure that person that bought in at 18 SOL is happy, right? And so there's new problems. And then it's, once again, you're buying into that. Do you believe that that person has the ability to find the solution?
Right.
And that's really, at the end of the day, what you're buying into when you're buying into an NFT project. So, okay, so here's the next question I have for you. We talk a lot about things that are happening within Web3, right? And a lot of what I look for is, does somebody have aspirations in Web2? Are they going to be expanding in different ways and things like that? How do you look at expanding, the Web2 aspect of things? And I consider that anything that's just not Web3, we'll just put in the Web2 bucket, right? But how do you look at that in terms of like, you've been crushing the opportunities within the Web3 space. How do you look at expanding into, different Web2 businesses or different, whether it's a physical product, whether you mentioned that earlier, a physical product, like how do you look at expanding into those sort of things, and what's your mindset and kind of philosophy with, expanding into those sort of avenues?
It's actually one of those weird things because like when we got into Web3, I think the general consensus was, we're decentralized. We're going there. We never have to go back. But then everyone quickly realized that you can't pay bills, you can't buy burgers with crypto yet, right? So I think there's a fair understanding and like awareness that like we need Web 2 to kind of power. Like the money's coming from Web 2, it's not coming from within Web 3. Like the money is coming in. The speculative aspect comes from the Web 2 side. So when I look at it from our perspective, when you're looking at products and you're looking at like how you can expand your IP into that sector, I always think like what connects with my particular audience and like the consumers I've built, because really you should be grooming those consumers in your ecosystem on what to get a feel for what they want. I think that was like one of the biggest missteps that Doodles did. Instead of trying to figure out what the community wanted, if we're going to Web 2, allow them to be the voice of a reason or concern. And then you cater to those holders because they're your investors. Like not the guys that gave you millions of dollars after the fact, but the people that you made millions of dollars off of when you raised and when you did generated secondary royalties. We can't forget that. So I think from our perspective, like we've got so many brands, right, that we could do quite a bit of different things. Like we talked about live action anime. We talked about manga with, comic books. We've talked about plushies and ceramics, action figures and things of that nature. But I think, one thing that we thought about was like, how do we redefine the space? How do we change the essential direction of like what people feel is possible and like what you can really do? Because I think the whole purpose of even being in Web 2 is to have other revenue sources outside of Web 3, because you can't sustain an NFT project solely off of secondary royalties. It's just not possible unless you're just a unicorn and you just eat all day long, right? But I think one of the things is like you want to onboard new people into your ecosystem. You want your brand to be resonated in the Web 2 format. And I think from what we look at it from this perspective is like, okay, which one of our brands can we take into that space? And what can we maximize on it? And where can we be competitive and be able to make it? Because here's the thing, at the end of the day, majority of the people that are going to buy your Web 2 whatever are going to be from the ecosystem. So the money's still their money. It's not like your holders are expanding. It needs to be broad enough that where it drives people's interest, intrigue outside of the holders that are currently there. Like I don't know the mechanisms are associated with like Pudgy Penguins, but I would assume at least 80% of the people that bought the Pudgy Penguin toys were from the Pudgy Penguins ecosystem already, right? So like maybe there's 20% people that were outside of the ecosystem. I don't know the numbers.
I would actually guess that it's probably more like 50-50. I think they truly had, people were excited to see such a well done item, right? And so I think there was excitement there that, like, for example, like I bought one, right? And it was, and my reasoning for it was because I was like, the Pudgy's still expensive. I can't go and buy the actual NFT right now, but the expansion of the IP is exciting for me. And when I saw the like videos of like, people giving it to their kid and stuff like that, I thought about like when my sister has a child, and like I get excited for that, and I get excited for, being able to give them the Pudgy Penguin, right? So I get excited about that. And I think there were a lot of people that saw the expansion of the IP as a win for the overall ecosystem.
Yeah.
I don't always think that means that everybody in the NFT ecosystem will support every, physical item that comes out. Probably not. But definitely when you see one that's just super well done, I think the whole community will support it.
Yeah, I think, and from my take in that regards was like mostly native Web3 people. Well, what I mean 80%, like I felt like majority of the buyers were probably from Web3. In
Oh,
some
definitely.
form.
Yeah.
And then like looking at it from that perspective, I'm like, oh, cool. And then they created intrigue because now you can then gift that thing to somebody that's not aware of it and kind of like innately bring them into the ecosystem or like have them attached to it in that brand. And that's the magic that we're trying to figure out, right? But you can't. Well, we have so many like IP potential. Like we could figure it out. Like we can try different things and find solutions to the issues. But I think with reinventing the wheel, maybe not doing what hasn't been done before, but finding a niche that lines up with the particular brand and IP, and then allowing us to be able to execute in something that people are not really necessarily used to or didn't think about. And prime example, I'll drop a little alpha energy, just kind of leave that out there and let people kind of think about whatever they want to think that is. But like the idea was, let's find a way to change the game and to onboard people in a sector and a segment of time that people are consistently active on. I think from the consumable standpoint is like the way of the future, right? You want the most powerful business models are residual based, right? And obviously reoccurring. So when you look at those things from a business perspective, it's how do I get reoccurring residual components associated with Web2 models where people are actively consuming my products, and then I just leave it there on a cliff, right? And then when you think about that, the light bulb goes on, because like, will somebody always go buy a ceramic toy all the time? Maybe. They'll collect them, and collectibles are some form of consumable, but the replenish need is only based on demand at the particular time. So it has its limitations, just like anything that's collectible. But if it's something that's consumed consistently, that has to be required and replenished, then you figured out the whole residual component, which is the most powerful component in economics. So our brain is like, okay, how do we get there? Now we figured out how to get there. Our biggest play is yet to come, and it's focused around the residual component of consumption, because we figured out that like, what is the most, like when you look at the need of your consumer and you look at what they want and what they need to have every consistent basis, if you can figure a way to put your item that they've already attached to in front of them and replace something they're already loyal to, you've won the game, right? Especially if you've earned the respect to them. Why wouldn't I? Why would I not? Why would I not back that? Because they've helped me make money. They've supported me. They've empowered me. They've inspired me. They've given me great experience. So I think our take is, we're gonna take a different path for our first inaugural launch of our physical products, which I've talked to you about, which I can't say too much, but you roll that back a couple seconds, you can dig around that. Because I think we're going to do another podcast and we'll bring it here, the product, so people can see it. And I think you get your live opinion about what we're about to do. But I think it'll make perfect sense. I think people immediately, when they see it, they're going to be like, holy shit, it makes sense. It just sounds right. It flows right. It's beautiful. And I think I grab inspiration from like Luca and all these other people doing these kind of physical goods. And I think that we're in the right place at the right time to do these type of things. And I think it needs to be hyper aggressive and getting it over there and bringing these brands. Like, 'cause I think Pudgy Premiums is a great IP for like kids stuff, and like it's just a great way to drive traction over from all different facets, right? And I think like what we're doing with all our brands and IPs, that we look back and take that 360 view and like, okay, this could be great here, this could be great here, this could be gaming, this could be manga and magazines, this could be comic books, this could be physical products and like toys. Like there's so much available to us, and the way we're going to open that door is going to be one that's fairly intuitive on the mechanisms in place to be able to do something very special. And it leverages something that I haven't brought to the table yet. My extensive background and network of professional athletes and celebrities that I know personally, that are my friends, that it just makes it so much easier for us to be able to implement this, because now in the previous taboo markets of like the earlier days of NFTs, anytime you saw a celebrity shilling some shit, you're like, I'm going the other direction. But now when you're looking at from the physical format and driving product-based implementation from a business perspective, from the Web3 to the Web2, it builds legitimacy, because one, you've got legalized legitimate entities in the Web3 space, now transitioning into Web2, getting real people to back these things. And it's not a shill fest, because they're not selling NFTs, they're selling products. And products are the key to success. Consuming, retention, and reoccurring are like the focal points. So, figuring that out, looking at what we're doing, and then like trying to like strategize on like the best plan. Like what do we do, right? Because I've seen everything at this point. right? We even at one point, Alien Friends was like one of the biggest IPs on ETH. Like it was huge, and they even had plushies. I remember them teasing them. I don't know where it is now, but like they just never did anything. Getting the toy build is not that hard, right? You can spend the money to go get it. Delivering it the way that like Pudgy Penguins did it is a masterpiece in a master class, and should be looked at and be like, okay, now I have something to look at to standardize the way to deliver and to execute a particular strategy. Now, how can I build upon that and build it in my own way is the way that I look at it. Because before there were really very rare instances of success, and then people need to see it. I'm the type of person I don't necessarily have to see someone do something to believe that it's possible. But if I see someone do something that is possible, it makes it that much more conviction in me to be like, okay, he did it, I can do it, right? And so we've got some really cool things. I think the product space is necessary now, but especially more prevalent because now we need to make people aware. And I think so cool brands that we have that need to have exposure outside of Web3 because it's just a small cool echo chamber that we live in. There's so many more people. Like it's not even that. It's ridiculous how many people don't know about the space. And I think the way to transcend it is to give them like gradual exposure through things that they're usually consuming or they're accustomed to. And if you do it that way, I think that's the recipe for success, and that's the master playbook right there for me. Like, what are they consuming consistently? What are they used to, and what they look for in a day to day that is part of their routine and habit. If you can fill that gap with a Web3 based product, you've essentially unlocked the key to everything. And I think we figured that out. And I think in a few weeks from now, we'll debut something that will essentially be legendary. I think it will change the way people look at product sourcing, how they do things in the space, and I think. I'm not saying that we reinvented the wheel, right? We talked about there was other instances of this, but I think the way that we're going to do it intuitively is very keen on where we're at, and then specifically to the niche that we're in because it's so broad. Even though Web3 is a niche, the space that we're going in the product direction is not a niche. It's one of the biggest industries on the face of the earth, if not one of the top three when it comes to consumables. So like you just look at those things and people can put it together. I won't paint it out. We'll leave a little bit of juice on it for everybody to figure it out. But no, it's a serious situation. And I think I got hats off to Luca and Pudgy and those guys. What they did inspired me to see a bigger picture on what's possible. And I think they were like the true real case scenario of like being successful doing that. And I don't think we've seen any merchandising companies, I think, that really blew up and did it big. I think, Hypebeast brands will probably come here. I just seems like a great opportunity for Hypebeast brands to come here, build Web3, do a PFP project, and drop dope merch. It's not that hard to be a part of the culture there as long as you understand it. And I think that now we're starting to get it. Like people are starting to think, I do need Web2. And if you take the conventional approaches that are associated with that and then implement them in Web3 with your own systems and strategies, then it's just so easy to marry the two. It's harder to take Web3 concepts and feed it to someone that doesn't know it. But if you implement Web2 concepts and break them down and bring them into Web3, it's so easy to kind of like streamline it. There's less friction and people can kind of get it. Like, okay, I get that. That's dope. Right. So we got some really cool ways. I'm not positioned to say them all yet because we still got some things to do, but gave enough Easter eggs for people to understand what Owlpha and what energy, what that means and what that's going to be for the future of our space, specifically our ecosystem, but the people that are inside of it. I think it's going to change. It'll be a great study case to see. I mean, though I think it's going to work, I think it's going to slap.
I'm excited for it. I mean, I think it's this too. It's getting each side to ask questions about the other, right? Like I think a lot of times when it comes to Web3, when we were in 2021 and we were in the bull run of things, you did have people in Web 2 going, hey, what is this Yuga? What is this Bored Ape? All that kind of stuff, right? And people started to ask the questions, right? You started to see when you saw people like Jimmy Fallon rocking a BOSE, right? When you saw people rocking one on their, like, I think Tobias Harris had one on his shoes during an NBA game, right? Like when you see that sort of thing, it causes people to ask questions, right? Same thing as that person who's now buying the Pudgy on Amazon, they might go, hey, what is this QR code that leads to this electronic, this NFT that this person now gets access to and all of that, right? It causes them to ask questions, right? And so, I get excited about that aspect of things. And so if you put out, this kind of, physical product, and then people in that space are going, hey, so what is this? What is this whole, what's going on behind it? Oh, this is NFT related. What does that really mean? And they start asking questions. It's much better than when you take it to them and you go, hey, here's NFTs, here's why you should care, and they're like, I didn't give a shit to begin with. It's much easier if they start asking you questions and you got answers for them, right? And so that's where I'm like, you've got to make it so big that it's impossible for people to ignore, and that's when they'll start asking questions. So a lot of times people in the NFT space are like, they focus a lot on ourselves, but I'm like, man, you got to focus on these other people. So I love this mentality, because it's like you have to focus on these other people, and you have to make it intriguing enough that they start asking questions. But if they're not asking questions,
right,
it's because what you're building is not intriguing enough yet.
Right.
So like keep building it, because if it's intriguing enough people will start asking questions, and that's when they will want to learn. But you can't take it to them and go, hey, you should want to learn about this. Well,
right.
Why? Because it's exciting. There's a lot of people in Web3 who give a shit, and it's like, okay, but like you got to make it where they start, hey, what is that, right? And and that can be merch, that could be a physical product, that could be a toy, that could be a consumable, that could be I've seen BAYC has like a burger shop in Orange County, right? There's another project that has a coffee shop. I want to say it's like in the Philippines. There's all these different things that cause somebody to walk in there and go, what is that? Right? And that is the biggest thing. If people aren't asking questions, then what you're doing is not exciting enough. If you make it exciting enough, they'll start asking questions, right? And I think we've even seen that with Owlpha, right? Like how many people were asking questions a month and a half ago? Not nearly as many who are asking questions now, right? But you've made it impossible to ignore, because people who only knew about Owlpha, or who didn't know about Owlpha, learned about it with Bombaclot, then they saw Ring Runners, and now they're asking questions. Who is this guy, right? What are they building, right? And then as you keep doing things, then other people are starting to ask questions. You might, I'm sure at some point, let's get into this real quick. You talk about expansion of IP, and you talked about in the first podcast episode how your original idea was an ETH project, and at the time you didn't feel like it was ready, so you waited. And so do you see an ETH project coming at some point? Do you see a Bitcoin Ordinals project coming at some point? What's the, and I'm not trying to rush you,
No, cool. No, I get this question all the time.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, here's a crazy concept, and I'm trying to think how to put this, and it's segueing off of the comment you made about like pushing people to do stuff. I think innately from a human psychology perspective, most people are abrasive to being forced to do things. So given the decision whether they want to do something or not is like innately human nature to, in a sense, especially from a consumer perspective, right? So you put a bunch of people in a room and you start asking them for water if they would like a water. Most people will say, no, I'm fine. You don't ask them and leave the waters out. People just help themselves, right? So you're allowing them to have the choice. You're offering it, but you're not forcing them to make the decision. You're literally just saying, hey, there's free waters in here. You haven't said anything, but yet they come in a room and help themselves versus, hey, you want a water? You want a water? It's the same thing. The difference is you allow them to make the subconscious decision. I say that to say, looking at like the space and what we've done, ETH is on our roadmap. Like we will go to ETH. It will be the final infinity stone, if you want to call it, in the gauntlet of decisions that we make in this product. It'll be one of the largest project drops that we do. And I think for us, everyone asks when's the next one? Like Colcer Cats is our next project launch coming out. It's a 10,000. I showed you the artwork, obviously.
It's fucking clean.
Yeah.
And I rarely get excited about art. Like I'll say that I feel like I've seen it all. It's clean as fuck. I'm a big fan. Yeah.
I think that in itself, we wanted a pure, like literally as pure as it could be PFP project. It's just no human traits, lo-fi, just clean, bro. And Colcer Cats, and since we're talking new IP, this is not the ETH project for those people that might be wondering. This is not an ETH project, and we haven't announced where it's going. But Colcer Cats essentially, it's essentially like when you think of culture, right? What do you think when you think culture? You immediately think like different races, different regions, and nationalities. But when I think culture, I think people think urban, lo-fi. They think like some like you're aware of different ethnicities and different groups and thought process. So what the thought process around culture is like, what is the most, like when I think about like soft medians in the space, cats are usually like one of the ones that just fit, right? And kind of like defaultly. But then at the same token, I was thinking like, how do we create and cultivate, accumulate like different regions of like how they like their perspective of like fashion and clothing and gear. And then we kind of correlated that together. So like each in the Colcer Cats, for instance, when we do this and dropping these IPs, we wanted to make sure that one, it's a PFP, purely PFP. Like this is a PFP project. but that it resonates with the different regions around the world. Not saying that we're going to have different hats that are like based on religion or not, but just like the look of it, the feel, the embody. That's why we called it Colcer Cats. And we wanted that because we want to do something that's like special, synonymous to like just being chill, right? Cats are chill, good, positive. Most of the time, they're just kind of like lazy and around. Life is cool. I think when we look at IP and we think of like the blockchains, I think where could it possibly have success at? Like, where will it do the best at? And I think when we're looking at like the markets and at a whole, like we've already done ordinals, which is the plan is to have one ordinals collection for every IP, because it's no point in not doing it, because these artifacts and the inscriptions, like I think from an innate perspective, like majority of the ones that we'll do moving forward from the ordinals perspective, they should be at limited to no cost to our consumers, because the exposure to it is so massive now that you just never know. With the ordinal space is so young, and I put our holders at a disadvantage. To answer the question, ordinals is definitely a play in our book. I don't see a reason why, as long as the IP makes enough sense to do it, we'll obviously execute it. But I think ordinals is in the playbook for at least 3 of our primary IP. We already have one for Owlpha called Rangers, the ordinal Rangers. So we'll probably have one for Bombaclot, and we'll have one for Ring Runners, of course. And the beauty about that is Ring Runners ordinals collection is going to be pixelated. So it's going to be the original pixel art. I don't know if I ever showed it to you, but the original pixel art was insane. It was animated. And then obviously Bombaclot will get one as well, which our community knows this, and they just win is when, right? But I think because, like, to be honest with you, ordinal collections don't offer really any utility, and they don't really have, I know there's some technology advancements with like royalties and stuff, but there's still a lot of things that's just not missing there. It's just really the most like primitive form of NFT, peer-to-peer, right? And then being very aware of that, it's mostly like a bragging right and like a luxury, not really real utility associated with them yet. Not yet, but it's coming. But then, like, looking at our forecast, we've got one more project, which is Colcer Cats, coming up next at some point, which we haven't announced anything about outside, like showing them like an image of it. They haven't even seen the branding yet. And then, and no one's seen the IP except like a few people, like you already know. But after that, we have an anime collection that we've been working on for a while. That's going to be, I don't have it with me, which sucks, because I just got a new iPhone. So like I don't have any pictures, but it's probably, if not the best artwork to date. Like, it's for us in general. Like it hits that board. And when you have so many dope IPs available to you, like we want to cover every niche. Like we want it all. Like we really want to cover those spaces, because they're going to tie in together. Like on our visual roadmap, there's a city on the map in the bottom right called Colcer City. In the first lore I said that Owlpha Prime, the primary character from Owlpha, went to this planet to answer to a distress call and was greeted by these furry, big-eyed, long-tailed creatures, which are the Colcer Cats. Everything is tied in. Everything is multiversed. The ETH project, I won't announce what it is yet, but when it does come, obviously I'll let you know, and then we'll do something special for it. But it's going back to claim my, because I got beat up pretty bad in ETH. Like I survived, but I want to go back there and do something truly special that's going to be crazy. And the beauty about this mint is that the people in our ecosystem, the Manifest ecosystem, are going to benefit from it first. They're going to be the ones that be able to have access to this mint first. And it's going to be some of the most incredible art that people have seen. Like, I'm not even gassing it. Like, we've incrementally gotten better as we built, right? Do I think that some of our earlier art just kind of like mid in its sense? Maybe so. But I think because we have that expectation, where do you go with high detail artwork at that point? What can you do? But if you kind of give yourself some room to grow in the shoe, which we've done with a lot of our IPs, it gives us so much more potential when it looks at it. So I think when we get to ETH will be the final product. It'll just be one of those incredible things. But I think the next project, Colcer Cats, has huge legs. I'm excited to see where we'll end up landing it. And, we probably, to be completely honest, outside of the 3 ordinals, which I don't really consider like typical NFT projects, they're mostly like trophies. I think we have 3 more IP deliverables in our roadmap for IP, and then we're done. And then really it's all about like product facing, utility, fleshing those out. That's it. Like, we're not going to go any crazier than that. Now, I don't know what happens next year. Like, it could get wild, right? But in the immediate future of 2023, I don't think we're going to go past those particular ones. We've got one small micro collection, which is around like either 111, which is called Celestials, which is going to be like a access pass, like a godly access pass of like just instantaneous access to all the top mints and all these other cool little intuitive things that we want to bring to the table with that particular one. But everything else outside of the ordinals and then those 3 mints that I just talked about, the anime collection, the Colcer cats, which we've announced somewhat to people, and then obviously the ETH project, which everybody's excited about. Like, what? I can't wait for the ETH project. Well, you're not excited about the gas that you're probably going to pay. But here's the beauty: incrementally over time, our holders that have been a part of every launch have saved so much in gas fees from Poly or Sol that by the time we get to ETH, those savings will already be built in there. We'll find a way to to costly affect it. Like, we want to have a contract that refunds all the gas whenever it happens. We've got some things in play that once we get to ETH, we want to eliminate the deflationary aspects of the chain itself that affect people, especially when we got people coming from smaller chains, right? And speaking about Polygon, obviously in its infancy, growing in the ecosystem, I just want to be able to put everybody in a great position to win, and I think this is the way to do it. So 3 projects left in our conquest of chains, and then obviously ETH we've not announced where cats are going, but they're coming. And then obviously the anime collection, which we're trying to figure out where we're going to go with that. And then obviously 3 more ordinals. But those are just like not, people shouldn't get up in a roar like he's doing a bunch of ordinals collections. Like, go look up BTC Machine. Like, those guys have freaking gazillions of ordinal projects. I think innately those people that mint ordinals collections through our ecosystem will have access in some form of utility, but like, it's just not crazy, right? It's just a form, and we want to be very low economics on those. Like, we're not trying to like make a bunch of money. We don't make royalties anyways. It's an experience and bragging right, and then like extending them into the inscriptions, exposing them into BTC, allowing them to have access to that stuff is just, it'd be a fool to us not to extend that to our communities, right? So I think those are like our focal points right now. Nothing too crazy yet. But I might have some other stuff kind of going around in my, maybe, I don't know.
I also think in a way it's also education, right? Like, when people are minting on other chains, you are learning with that, right? Like, I bought a Bitcoin project the other day just because, and I knew nothing about it, and I was just like, hey, I think I lost all my money on it. Don't care. But it was like $50, and I was like, I want to just buy a Bitcoin ordinal because I haven't done that yet, and I just want to have the education of knowing how to do that using Xverse Wallet and everything like that, right? And so I was like, I've never done it. Let me try it. It's a $50 lesson for me. I know I'm not going to make money on this most likely, and that's fine. Like, it's a lesson, right? So I think, we have to constantly grow our own knowledge base, and that was my way of doing that, right? Yeah. So here's how I want to wrap up, because this has been an awesome episode. You and I sit here, an hour and 45 goes by real quick. Right. So let's wrap this up with, you've talked a lot about, why people should be, kind of some of the future plans and everything like that. So my biggest question to you is, a lot of this requires trust. They have to have trust in you. They have to have trust in the team at Manifest Labs and everything like that. So I want to end this with, why should people, whether they're holding Bombaclot, whether they're holding Ring Runners, whether they're holding Owlpha, whether they're holding any of these other projects, any of the new mints that you've got coming up, why should people trust you and the Manifest Labs team, and why should they be bullish on the future?
Well, I mean, obviously that's a biased question, loaded response, to be honest. But I think the reality is this, right? Look at what we do, right? Look at what we've accomplished. Look how we articulate, how active we are. I think the keys to understanding where something has true potential or whether or not it has enough continuity for you to believe in it is based on the actions of the people that lead. And let me be a conduit of that barometer. Judge me based on my actions and my overly communicative behavior that I do consistently. I think if you're looking for any home to be a part of, it would be this home, built on continuity with, our core team over 13 years. I mean, just those things you just don't see in the space. And I think you look at that, being from a military background, operating at a military level as far as how we organize our organization and structure our build plan and strategy, and understanding that this is a business. And we vocalize that this is a business. Not saying we're not paying tribute to the grassroots of the Web3 space and decentralization, but also understanding that we need to be very aware and coherent that the Web2 space is instrumental in the success of Web3, and then that we have a very strong idea of what that's going to look like for us. And we're not building it on the fly. I always use the analogy, we're not in the airplane building a parachute to the ground. We built the parachutes before we went into the air. So we're prepared when we take that jump to understand and mitigate risk and be able to pivot and to make adjustments. And I think if you want to be a part of a transparent community that articulates, that has a passion, that understands the direction we're going, and focused on community curation and obviously building rapport, I think this is the place to be. I think you can't find a better one. I want to be the most hyper vocal founder in the space because I think that's necessary. I think it's needed. And I think when I look at, and I'm not judging myself but look at it from my peers' perspective, what can I do that maybe they're not all doing? And that's who's talking the most, who's overly communicating, who's articulating their vision consistently and concisely. I don't live behind announcements. I live in the mic talking to our people consistently so they can feel that passion. They understand what we're doing. And I think that's what separates me from a lot of other people when it comes to this space. And we're just getting started. If you want to be in the beginning and be a part of something truly exciting, I think this is the right place. And I think we've got the things necessary to be successful. And you're betting on me as a person. Like, I'm the person that's going to run this thing. I'm going to run the ball. I'm the QB. Get us down to the goal line, man. And let's get the TDs. And, you know, I'm just excited because, like I said, it's a family business. Right. Every time I'm on a space, my wife is behind the Owlpha account. If I'm on my primary, like, we've got the people, infrastructure, continuity within our team, and we run this as an organizational level, a high level intensity and frequency, because we want to win in a big way. So this is the place to be. This is, if you want to get in early, man, this is the one to do it, because we got some really cool things. And once again, I cannot harp on this, business oriented. We understand from a professional standpoint, this is a business. This is a business. So. And I implore everybody, check us out, man. Like, they need to come and check us out. This is going to be fun. I'm really excited about the future, what we have coming on, man.
Yeah, man. Well, hey, I'm excited too. I always enjoy chatting with you, dude. Even, you know, from our conversations between podcasts, our conversations when you get here before we start a podcast, you know, when we do this, our conversations after the fact. Like, I love your passion. I love your excitement. You're always asking me right when we get done with this, yo, when's this podcast coming out? When the clip's ready, all that stuff. I love that energy, because there's a lot of people in life who don't have that kind of energy, that kind of passion. And when you find that, it's a rare thing and it's exciting. And so, dude, I appreciate your energy. I appreciate your ready and willingness to just get after it. And, bro, couldn't be more excited for everything that you guys have coming. So, you know, hey, I know that you'll be back here soon.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes when I say that to people, like, hey, you know, I'm ready for the next time you come back here. Sometimes I wonder, when is that next time going to be? With you, I already know it's only going to be probably a few more weeks. You'll be back out here. We'll have something exciting to talk about. And probably after that, it'll probably be a few more weeks. You'll be back out here. We'll just keep it going.
Right.
But, man, it's going to be fun to document this entire journey, and to document the peaks and the valleys and the, you know, trials and tribulations and everything that leads to, you know, where you're going. So,
yeah,
dude, I'm excited.
Let's do it, man. Hey, this is informative, and I hope people get a better insight on what we're doing, because I think being overly communicative and really setting the tone is what's going to set the future for what we're trying to build.
Facts.
So it's cool, man. Thank you for having me again. I'll be back again for sure. 2 weeks, man.
There we go.
Is that it's my phone going off.
Oh, that's your phone. I was like, what is that noise? All right, well, that's a perfect time to wrap it up. So, guys, appreciate you guys tuning in. You'll be back soon. A lot of exciting things coming up soon. So,
thank you, man.
No problem.
That's my affirmation thing, by the way.
There we go. Love it. All right, guys, we'll talk to you soon.
Peace.
Peace.